dead. For those who do not pay proper homage and treatment of those who have passed on, do not treat life with respect. We have a situation today in Vilnius where a cemetery, one of the last remnants of a glorious community, faces destruction for the construction of a convention center. There are many locations which would be suitable and fitting for that kind of an institution, not on top of a cemetery. One of the few remnants, one of the few reminders of what was once a glorious center of Jewish learning and Jewish life. Tens of thousands of people have rallied to this cause because they understand the significance. We appeal to the government of Lithuania, a democratic government, a member of NATO, a member of the EU, that subscribes to these values and to the norms that we all cherish, to today make the right decision, to stop the construction of the convention center on the cemetery, to accord those people the lasting rest and peace they're entitled to. It will also be a reminder to those who perished in the Shoah and the Holocaust that there is a new era, an era of respect for the Jewish living and for the Jewish dead. So we ask that everyone join in appealing to the government of Lithuania that they will stand up at this moment and do the right thing. We know they can, we know they have. We hope they will do it now.
It's a great day here today in Jerusalem, and with me I'm honored to have Emmy Goldstein from Johannesburg, who's going to be discussing with us the contribution which South African jury have made to, Lithuanian jury has made to South Africa. Emmy, great to have you with us. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your position in Johannesburg, what you do?
Yes. Hi, Grant. Thank you for the opportunity. I actually live in Johannesburg, originally from a town by the name of Bethel, which was a small town around 117 kilometers, 160 kilometers, I should say, from Johannesburg. And originally involved in farming, I have now, for the last probably 40 years, been involved in the computer and telephony world, and more recently in the area of consulting in customer experience strategy. I have a lot of interest in Lithuanian genealogy, history, etc., and also for quite a number of years have run a Yiddish group in South Africa where we read Yiddish texts, we talk Yiddish, and in fact have been studying a lot of the materials that were written by Yiddish authors who came to South Africa and who at one time were quite prolific in terms of what they produced. A lot of the history of Jews in South Africa, in fact, is encapsulated in these Yiddish texts and has not really been written, has not been recorded in Jewish history books that have been written about South African Jews. And as a result, one gets a feeling of what Jews came through when they came from Eastern Europe. As you may know, sorry?
Gewaldig, that's fantastic. Ellie, your connection, your family connection to Lithuania, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So my grandfather, who was originally surname was Olschwang, and who changed his surname either in the UK or when he got to South Africa to Goldstein, was one of 8 children. He was born in a shtetl by the name of Pavanda or Pavandeno, which is not far from Vorna or Varniai, in which he then grew up. And his parents, Leib Itza Olschwang and his mother, Rocha Leah Kalabelnik, were citizens of Lithuania for many years. My grandfather, Coleman Mayer Goldstein, came to South Africa approximately 1899, where he joined an uncle of his in Oudtshoorn, which was at that stage a large Jewish community. He then fought in the Boer War with Lord Kitchener, with the British forces, as the Cape at that time was a British colony. Eventually moving in 1900 end of 1902, beginning of 1903 to Johannesburg, where he did various jobs, including transport contracting, etc., and ultimately landed up in Bethel, which is about 100 miles from Johannesburg, on a farm, and was then farming from approximately 1915, I believe, for the rest of his life. I myself did some farming for a number of years and then moved to Johannesburg when my children actually needed to go to school here, and I wanted them to go to a Jewish school.
No, that's very interesting. Now, was it dairy or were you doing corn? What millies? What sort of farming did you do?
We did mainly dairy, maize, and sheep farming. Some beef, some potatoes as well.
Right. Because
as you may know, Bethel. Sorry.
My grandfather came from Wepener. Well, my father was born in Wepener. You know
yes.
where that is?
Yes, in the Free State.
And they were very involved in farming as well. I mean, it's a Yiddish geschäft, you know. It was one stage a Yiddish geschäft, the farming. But sorry, you were saying yes. Go ahead. But
yes, so in fact, the Bethel was actually a large sort of. It has a large number of Jewish farmers in Bethel. At probably one stage, the largest number of Jewish farmers collected together in South Africa. And in fact, Bethel and its surrounds were many Jewish farmers there, who in fact, starting from someone who you may have heard of called Israel Lazarus, who was the Mili king in a place called Creole, the Jews across South Africa, mainly from Lithuania, had a huge impact on South African farming and bettering the agricultural practices that were there when they started. Going back to Lithuania, so my grandfather's family were from, as I mentioned, Vorna. His great-grandfather came from a place called Luknik or Luoki. And all of these areas were in the district of Telshe. So my grandmother, that's my paternal grandmother's, her mother's family were from Tels and were always very much linked to the Tels yeshiva. And as a result, it's quite interesting that the links into Lithuania, specifically within the Tels region, are very strong.
Well, you know, Rabbi Goldstein in South Africa was a Tels. He was a Tels himself. I mean, after the Tels Shiva moved to America, to Cleveland, I believe, and he himself was a product of the chief rabbi of South Africa. Is really a product of that whole of the Tels Shiva, really, in a manner of speaking. You know the.
Correct. I knew Rabbi Goldstein Zatzal, the original Rosh Hashiva, very well, as well as another person from Tels who was very much involved was Rabbi Tanza Zatzal, who passed away last year. And yes, and I think that both of them were a huge factor in bringing the South African community back into much more involved Yiddishkeit. I think what happened in the early years, the late 1890s, maybe early 1900s, Jews came to South Africa and perhaps became more involved with trying to make a living than keeping up their Yiddishkeit. It's not a generalization, but there was a large number who did. And as a result, I think that while South African Jews never lost their link to Judaism, I think that there was a very small percentage of Orthodox, as we probably could term them. But ultimately, I believe that the Telz Yeshiva, in sort of influence that came here, was very much what brought South Africa to where it is today, where there's a very large percentage of people who are
now, in the last 20 years. I mean, we've seen quite a strong comeback, so to speak, to Judaism. Whereas when families came over initially, because of the pressures of livelihood, I mean, you still have them today, but for whatever reason, I mean, a lot of that was a lot of the Judaism. They didn't leave it, but it was just just given the circumstances, the trying circumstances, I think they had to improvise, so to speak. But today, I mean, the last 20 years, has been like maybe you can tell us about that. I mean, what sort of resurgence has there been? I mean, you're really speaking about the Lithuanian and the Jewish community, aren't you?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the vast majority of South African Jews are of Lithuanian origin. And besides the agricultural mention I made earlier, I think they had a huge influence on the economics of South Africa, albeit the percentage of the population that the Jewish community is here is tiny. And yet, when you ask people who don't know how many Jews are there in South Africa, they'll say probably 1 million. And yet, if there are 60,000, that's a lot, So there is a huge influence.
I mean, some of them actually included Nobel Prize winners as well. I believe there are two. One was Krug, was from Durban, and there were a few that were Nobel Prize winners.
Yes.
So I mean, it certainly made the contribution.
Absolutely. In fact, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but have you heard of the endogastric? What is it called? A gastroscope? The way that they do gastroscopies and colonoscopies today, which is using an optic fiber with cameras, etc. This was all designed. The original design of the scope was done by someone from my hometown, a chap by the name of Basil Hershowitz, who in the USA found the first optical fiber gastroscope. And yes, absolutely. I mean, that's just one of many, of the Jewish community that's involved.
Incredible. So, as you know, we conducted this under the auspices of the Save Vilna Coalition, which is a group that is committed to fighting against the desecration of a cemetery, the Shlippishak Cemetery in Vilnius. There are over 50,000 of them. And in fact, the chief rabbi of South Africa is part of that opposition as well. As is the Good Israel and many other different organizations.
Yes.
Any sentiments on that? Any thoughts on what's going on in terms of the proposed conference center, which would desecrate the cemetery?
Yes, I'm aware of that. In fact, I've listened to videos, etc., by David Katz and Grant Gotchen and Silver Foti. So I keep abreast of what is going on there. I must be quite honest. I think it's totally disgusting. In fact, I cannot believe that on the one hand, Lithuania would require people to visit. They're so dependent on Jewish tourism, and yet they would allow this to happen. And
this is the whole thing. Like, the actual cemetery itself hasn't really been restored to the way it should be, and as a consequence, many feel that the potential tourism that could be realized just for the cemetery itself is really not being is not being realized. That
yes.
that opportunity. So I mean, there are efforts to restore the cemetery and to improve the area and give it a facelift. And at the moment, everyone agrees that it's not really it's not really appealing from a aesthetic perspective, aesthetically. But hopefully that will change. And efforts like people like yourself who are voicing their opposition to it, really do contribute to the debate and to the narrative, which I think is very important.
I honestly think that, and this is my own gut feel, that Lithuania, I mean, this might be a strong statement. I don't think Lithuania could prosper if it is dependent on that much tourism, if they don't make at least if they don't ensure that these sanctified areas are kept, as they are. As far as the building that is there currently is concerned, why is that not, maybe if they want to keep it there, why is that not turned into some kind of museum, perhaps, or something that is holy, or even demolished? I don't know. But, those details is really up to the people that are working on the project. I just think it's so wrong. And in fact, I do believe that, the revisionist history that is happening at the moment doesn't help towards that. I mean, my interest in Lithuania, as I say, historical, perhaps some kind of nostalgia, genealogical, etc. And in fact, I almost did a tour there in 2009, which was stopped due to unforeseen circumstances on our end. But my yearning to visit Lithuania has waned as a result of this whole revisionist history and these type of things happening. And I think, quite honestly, it's time that people in Lithuania, the powers that be, realized what actually happened in the Shoah, and that they apologize fully for it, and they make every effort, if they really want to prosper, to make sure that, for example, the cemetery is kept in its pristine condition, that no further construction is done there, that cemeteries across Lithuania in the Städtlach are properly maintained. These type of things are important. I just believe that, when you start putting in museums about the heroes, the Lithuanian heroes that are put out there, and make such a fuss, and then you find that the granddaughter of one of them actually realized who he really was. And just by the way, my grandparents, my grandfather's, two of his brothers and a sister were murdered at the Gerul forest and the Reinai forests in Telz district, together with children as young as 3, their various children. And the fact that, it's just absolutely unbelievable that one can realize that these things can be denied that they happened. I mean, I have got letters from one of the survivors who lives in Israel today, my cousin, where she wrote in 47 to my grandfather and tells him in Yiddish exactly what happened.
She was there. She was
Oh,
there.
absolutely. She was at a pit where they were shooting, and one of the Lithuanian collaborators who was shooting them, listen to this, actually used to work for her father. He looked after her father's horses. And he then said to her mother to take the daughter and run, he'll look the other way. And the mother said, no, she'll stay with the children. And the daughter and her mother's sister, her aunt, managed to escape. They were shielded by partisans. Eventually, she landed up in a convent. And ultimately, her aunt found her, where she then got married in Cholet, in Chavel, and moved to Israel in the early 60s. She's still alive. Her husband passed away last year, I think it was. But she's already in her 90s.
Wow, incredible story. Absolutely heartbreaking.
She lives in Petach Tikva, and in fact, there is in the Yad Vashem testimonies, there is a video of her at a younger age.
Incredible story. Well, Eddie, we really appreciate you having you on the show and to be able to relate some of those instances and those experiences to us, because undoubtedly, the Lithuanian Jewish community made an incredible impact on South Africa, and also we do hope that there are changes in Lithuania which can hopefully, I mean, with a new government and with a new, younger, more democratic, open-thinking generation, can lay the seeds for a positive relationship with the Jewish community. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. And only good news for everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and I wish you Hatzlacha. I hope all goes well.
Thank you. Amen.
Have a good day.